Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Since there is no public here, let's call the meeting to order. It's about 3 minutes after 7 on the 28th of February. We don't need to ask for public comment because there's no public here, and I don't think I need to read into the record the normal things that we read into the record because there's nobody here to listen to them. So, Robin, why don't we go ahead and start? We need to address the minutes of the meeting of the 24th. Are there any changes, corrections, et cetera? Hearing
I
none.
move we accept the meetings of January 24th Planning Commission meeting.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Okay, Robin, you want to call the first item, please?
Okay, the first item is RZ 12-02 to adopt the corrected City of Milton zoning map as indicated on the EIS system, including all zoning actions prior to January 1st, 2012, as shown on the current zoning map dated January 2012 that you have in front of you. So basically, this is just belt and suspenders. We just go back and do an audit of the map and also make sure that I think we had 3 rezonings last year, the 2 on Providence Road and the one at the subdivision up on Highway 9 near the Forsyth County border. So anyway, that's just practice that we have just to make sure everything's correct.
Are there specific changes from last year that you want to point out?
Are those 3?
I mean material.
Those 3 that were added in through the actions of the commission. There were some cleanups that needed to be done. If you look at the larger portion inset map, just kind of at the northwest corner of Webb and Highway 9 where the green is, that's an MIX. For whatever reason, the GIS system kind of spilt over into the Hermitage, which is that yellow AG1. So we cleaned that up. I mean, it's just, so that was worked on. Let's see. So those kind of things that was a big one. And then there was a subdivision out in the hinterland, I believe, Freeman Wood Lane, I can't remember the subdivision, but right there smack in the middle, just west of Summit Hill Elementary, that was not the correct zoning category. That was an R2 instead of R2A, so that was corrected. So obviously on the hand-drawn map, truly it was the correct, I mean, it's always been correct, but this is what we go by, so that's what this item is for.
Okay. In the upper left-hand corner, I'm assuming that the intent was to depict the various overlays.
Right.
I'm not sure I understand the indicator for the Northwest Fulton overlay.
Northwest would be the green. I'm not sure what you mean by the indicator.
Well, I misread it then. The red are the state routes, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just state routes.
It just happened that the red happened to kind of be a line through state
Right,
route.
yeah, those
Okay.
are state routes. So that's
Okay.
also part of the zoning ordinance calls out that it should be on the zoning map, the overlay district. So that's why we have that little box in there.
Okay.
I think that was, there was one other fix. It was along Highway 9. That was the, right across from Walmart on the northwest side or whatever, on the north side of Highway 9, just by the Kroger. It's John McMillan's property. He'd come in, in 07 or 08 and zoned some in the back to the office. Well, it was overlapped all the way up to the front, so they had pulled the whole parcel instead of cutting.
That's that one that we looked at. Didn't he come before us for a?
Correct.
Is that the piece you're talking about?
Yeah, but not the,
Okay.
you know, where all the strip center is
Right,
say C1.
in the front,
but on-
right.
Right, but on the zoning, it pulled the O&I all the way to the front,
Oh,
so
okay.
we just had them cut out that portion.
Robin, on the inside map, why is the new high school designated as NUP?
Or CUP.
Well, CUP, NUP, I can't tell from
Yeah,
the
that was
color.
the original zoning, and that.
It wasn't rezoned when the school bought the property?
No, they don't have to rezone.
No, I know, I didn't know whether they did or not.
No, they didn't, they
Okay.
just used the existing.
Okay. Any questions? Any other questions about the, what are you laughing at?
No.
Anyone? Hearing none, we need a motion to approve, to adopt.
I'll do that. I move we adopt the corrected City of Milton zoning map as indicated on the geographical information system, including all zoning actions prior to January 1st, 2012, as shown on the current zoning map dated January 2012. It was agenda item RZ 12-02.
I'll second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next item?
A very fast meeting.
Uh-huh.
This could be a very fast meeting.
Could be.
Could be.
No.
Okay, so this next item is the
Signed
ongoing
ordinance will be-
project
Yeah,
of the code enforcement matrix for Milton. See, I guess most people have, I don't need to go through the memo, but you guys get to read it online. So we can just go through it, and again, this is a work in progress. If there's any suggestions, I will say that I'm only dealing with issues that have to do with community development. The prototype of the Forsyth County version has, you know, their whole entire county and things like animal control and things that we have no control of. So just keep that in mind, that it's not the entire, every kind of different code in the city, but just basically what we either administer or enforce within the city code, so. And also, I guess I don't know if I mentioned it in the memo, but there are certain things when it is, there was one section, I believe it was the erosion control that they require, what was the second offense?
Erosion controls on the second page.
Yeah, I know. That wasn't it because it didn't seem like it was that hard, but maybe it was. There was one of the sections that actually did say for the second offense, it would be X amount of dollars. So it was already written into the code. It was a little odd, so I just.
Robin,
Go ahead.
how does this compare with what Alpharetta, the city of Alpharetta
They
does?
don't do it this way. They have a special commission that deals with their code enforcement. So they don't have anything codified
Okay.
for their recommendations. Forsyth and Cobb have the most Forsyth is the most comprehensive. Cobb has a similar situation. And then there were other jurisdictions that kind of just, you know, it was very general. There was no specifics, other than it's a state law of 1,000 per offense.
You know, let's just back up for a minute if I may, just for the two new members, just to explain. When code enforcement goes out to enforce these, the first action is a warning.
Right.
And then after the warning, then we issue, well, first we give a verbal, and then the second is a written warning, and the third action is a citation. The citations then get scheduled for municipal court. Unlike Alpharetta, where they have a citizens board that acts as the court, okay? Here, we bring these to municipal court. Now, the problem, because we've talked to the city solicitor, who handles the cases before our local judge, is that there's very little understanding of code enforcement issues, and in terms of what is severe and what is not severe. They handle DUIs and other minor criminal issues, which they're very familiar with, but when it comes to code enforcement, they're not very familiar. So, the request by the Planning Commission to start to look for some guidelines here in terms of putting a monetary amount to reflect the seriousness of the offense is a very good idea, and they're very willing to consider that because they really need guidance, and they admitted that. So that's sort of where we are tonight.
And I will say that, and also for the benefit of our new members, that we don't really have very many citations that actually go to court. I mean, I think the last one was maybe 2 months ago for a banner. I mean, I think the goal of typically, at least right now, of our code enforcement is trying to correct the problem before it gets to that point. So there's not a huge number of cases that actually end up in court. And then also, as far as zoning violations, let's say if we've had this happen, then illegally operated landscape business. Well, you don't really cite them. They will come to court, and the judge will say, okay, you need to go try to get your correct zoning or your use permit. And there's a stay on the citation, so they don't even at that point in time pay a fine. What they're told to do is go and correct it, and everything stays while they're under that procedure. So certain zoning violations, you know, it would, especially if they're required to get another zoning district or a use permit, you know, we don't just charge them, okay, I'm gonna charge you $1,000 because you don't have the right one. No, we ask them, you know, either cease the operation or come in and ask for the correct zoning. So
I would think, just to add to that, our intention is, with something formally adopted on the record, that as you bump into people who say, well, I had no idea, that the fact that this is actually on the books, you would hope that nothing would ever have to go to court, because we finally have some teeth in things that have been so nebulous before. You can actually point to a document that says this is where it goes. And geez, if I'm somebody who's an active business member who's historically been in violation, now you hope that never happens again, because they do have something they can go point to and say, here's where we're going to go.
Suppose you have a business that incurs $2,000 worth of fines. They come in, they're issued a ticket or citation, and they don't pay it. What's the next step?
they're contempt of court.
Yes, they have a warrant issued.
Okay. For the business owner? Okay. And if it's a home, it's the same thing. It's not it's a warrant. It's not, say, like a lien or.
No,
against
I
the
mean,
It could actually
if
go.
they've been fined, they haven't paid,
turn it into a
the
lien.
judge has the authority to issue a warrant
Okay.
And theoretically put them in jail,
and
correct?
put them in jail,
Yeah.
absolutely right, yes. We have one pending case that's been going on for many, many years, that's really where it's about to end up.
Really?
Well, it's
The-
the wall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wall on Cogburn.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Although from what I understood, that he is paying, you know, he has like $30,000 or $35,000 of fines, and he's supposedly paying because the probation, they have to check on him and make sure that he's paying at least a portion of it every month, so I think that's keeping him out of jail.
Yeah, but that's what his choice was, either
Right.
go to jail or start paying.
George?
But he didn't correct it.
Well, that's the other,
So,
I mean, it's
okay.
ongoing,
Okay.
there's more to the case than, yeah.
Okay.
Are these going to be changed now based on last Wednesday night's council meeting, as it relates to window signs, flags, and
Well,
so
I tried
forth?
to, it should be the same code section with the new one.
Yeah, but it says 20% of the windows, and I don't believe that's correct now after the,
No, it is.
They did 20%.
Well, there's an additional
No.
criteria, it's 20% or 10% of the,
Well, I was gonna
Wall.
get into all the details, as long as it's
Yeah.
that citation, but.
No.
It's 20.
According to,
So they can,
no, it can't be more than
You're right.
20% or
Right.
10% of the wall.
right.
Yeah.
But,
Trust me.
okay, well,
We'll
like I
have to talk
say,
about it,
okay.
yeah.
Are we
No,
gonna talk about it tonight?
We're hopefully gonna talk about it if we get
Okay.
to see the ordinance, yes.
fine, well, that,
Yeah.
okay.
I have it right here.
Yeah, and also, should flagpoles and all that they got into quite a bit of detail at council be included in this?
We can do that, I mean, you know.
I mean, I'm not,
To be honest,
It's
we've
no
only
big
had
deal,
one
but-
incident with a flagpole, and that was with RVs when we first started.
Correct.
So,
I think it
I mean,
more
we can-
deals with homeowner,
well, now it
no,
does.
subdivisions
We can-
and individual
So like I
homeowners.
said, we can add more things.
Yeah, well, I wasn't-
That's fine.
I just wondered where that
It's not all
was.
inclusive, every single thing that could possibly be
Come
done,
up.
but just some major issues.
Okay, fine.
And I
Well,
think even with this, you know, guideline, I think if something came up, the judge could kind of like assert for her, or the city solicitor could kind of figure, okay, well, this is kind of this type of. And also, something that we didn't mention, that I think we did before, was that code enforcement will do a little note that goes with the case, with the citation, to let the city solicitor know, well, this is the second time or the fifth time, and this is a bad situation, please, you know, deal with it, you know, in a more stringent way versus a first-time offender. So not only do we have this, but we're gonna have this communication between code enforcement and the city solicitor to kind of give her some guidance about what kind of offender that is before her.
Well, Kathleen, to your follow-through, they must have been afraid of those fines in court because those signs came down immediately after the day we spoke at the Gold Place.
Well, I apologize for not having that happen sooner. but,
Okay.
yeah.
It was taken
Well, they
care
didn't
of.
know about the, I mean, they just
No,
did it.
I know,
because-
but-
Yeah.
It seems to me there's a couple of things we need to do here. One, I think to Fred's point, we all need to kind of look at it and see if there's anything that we feel like is missing from here that needs to be covered. And some of that obviously is gonna come out of the sign ordinance, but there are other things that could be, you know, dealt with here. The other thing is, I still think we need to get the ordinance that defines the process so that we're clear about what that process is and what the steps in that process are. Because one of the things that is in your cover letter that came from Ken is that the largest fine allowed for each offense is $1,000. We need to define what an offense is, because what we talked about before is the idea that we wanted to, you know, as an example, for somebody that, like the wall, that if we don't have the ability for that offense to accrue on a daily basis until the problem's fixed, it kind of gets back to Mark's point about, you know, at some point, you know, the threat of jail is there, sure, but the other threat of the financial thing, if it's a one-time, one fine, they'll pay the fine and keep doing what they're doing. So the recurrence of that, somehow we got to get a balance between, or figure out how to allow a fine to accrue without violating this idea of it being $1,000 per offense. And if each day can be defined as an offense,
Right. If the
can we
citation-
have one citation cover that, or does it need to be one citation, one offense?
From what I understand is that to do that once every day, there has to be a new citation written every single day.
And yet, one of our purposes, if you remember going back to our purpose statement, was to allow a single citation to be sufficient until the violation's resolved. So,
Yeah, I think
if
that's-
there's no physical way to do that because the law won't allow it, then that's okay, but if there is a way to physically do that, that's one of the things we wanted to accomplish. The other thing, I guess I'm a little bit surprised at, because I thought we talked about it before, in the absence of this matrix, the court clearly has full discretion to do whatever they want to do. Part of the reason for talking about this from the get-go, I think, was to try and get more consistency and more certainty about what these things were going to be. If these end up being nothing more than just recommendations to the court, and there isn't mandatory fines in particular situations, then we haven't accomplished that part of our purpose either.
Well, I believe that the city solicitor was very open to our suggestions, and I think that she would take this. And obviously, there's still more discretion of the judge. I mean, he could be even, like the first offense, he could go up to $1,000.
Oh, yeah, on the upside, sure.
Right, right. But I believe that their intent of the court is to be very cooperative with whatever we suggest. I mean, I don't think that, it's less of a document, however way it ends up being, if we add more things or adjust things. I believe that it was the city solicitor's intention to totally go by whatever we say, because she's even confessed that that's not her forte. So
No, I understand, but there's a difference between it being a recommendation versus, it's like minimum sentences, right? The court always has discretion to go above that, but if the law dictates a minimum sentence for some act, then that's a minimum that the court doesn't have the discretion to go below. So we need to understand whether ultimately this is nothing more than a guideline.
Well, I believe from the opinion of
The attorney.
that it's recommendations, and he was not in favor of codifying this into some sort of law.
I understand, but does that mean it can't be codified, or he doesn't recommend doing that is really the question?
Well, I mean, he just said it shouldn't be. I mean, I guess if we press the issue, we could ask more thoroughly to say, is that impossible to do, or is it just,
Okay.
it's-
Yeah, I'd like to have an understanding of that.
Yeah, I mean,
Why-
it all goes back, this is why we wanted him to review our purpose in the first place, right? There were 4 things that we wanted to accomplish, and at least in my reading of it, what he's come back with here, and not you, but what you've provided us from him, cuts the legs out from under a couple of those primary purposes. If it's only a guideline, then it may improve the consistency a little bit, but and it may provide more certainty, but it's still completely up to the discretion of the court, then it doesn't really get us where we thought we were going to be. I'm more concerned about the recurring fine issue, because I think that's the one we talked about most, is we can't afford to have the code enforcement officers going out there every day to cite somebody for the same thing that they haven't fixed, but by the same token,
Why not? I mean, Milton's not, we're not talking about the state of Georgia here. I mean,
Well-
how long does it take to drive back over to somebody's property and issue a new citation?
you're right, that's a good point.
Well, I think that we'd have to get advice from the attorney to see if there was a way of making that
Okay.
just be until they get the situation fixed, so.
And to clarify too, Kathleen, the way you shared the process, is that the written procedure as it stands today, where the first time the code enforcement officer visits, it's simply a verbal, the second time it's a written, and the third time it's actually a citation?
That's standard practice in all 3 cities in which I've worked with the code enforcement people. That's the procedure we've used.
Because that really means that by the time you get to the first offense, it's really the third
visit,
offense.
yeah.
Right.
He's trying to
Right,
correct the first offense.
but I think the policy has been to use the carrot and not the stick in a sense.
Right.
So, and that's a policy decision by the council in terms of which route to go. But we err on the side of trying
If it's the written policy, I'm all for it. If it's a casual, where it's not in black and white, then it becomes the discretion of the code enforcement officer as well.
It is black and white that you issue a warning first, a written warning, and then you have to issue the written warning before you can issue the citation. So there is a 2-step required. A lot of people don't even know that they're, violating an
Right,
ordinance.
Yeah,
right, that's why I'm okay
So-
with there
so
being.
we do have the verbal, we give them, we give them a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
If it's a banner, we give them 24 hours. If it's a fence, we might give them a week, because they have to get somebody in there to get
Sure.
the poles out. So
Sure.
it varies in terms of how long we give them, but.
And I'm completely okay with any.
Notice requirement.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Notice requirement.
Yeah, as long as there is a standard operating procedure that goes along with it, where there's an understood that the first time is a verbal. We don't want to be, imposing a fine to somebody who clearly is just in the dark on what they're doing. But I want to get to the point where we do have a standard procedure that can be followed, where some of the discretion comes out of it, and then it's a 3-step process to get to the first, or a 2-step process to get to the first citation, because then people will take it seriously. If it's going to be casual and it's not written, then it becomes a lot of wasted time and energy.
Well, it also opens up people interpreting any way they want to.
Exactly.
Sure.
And, you hope that there's continuity from one
Yeah.
enforcement officer to the next, and from one city solicitor to the next, et cetera, but you can't count on that.
Yeah.
Well, the written warning will say you have so many days to correct this. And then we usually give them like one more day just to err on the side of caution. And then we go out. And then they get a written citation. And it has the court time and date right on it.
Good.
And,
It's like a traffic ticket.
it's like a traffic ticket, You know exactly where you stand when you get that.
Yeah.
And, except for the traffic ticket, you usually know how much you're gonna pay. With ours, you don't,
Yeah, I'm thinking about one. We all have our own pet peeves, and I've got one that their banners appear on a regular basis, and their events may last only a week, and so they're never going to be subjected to the citation unless if we're going to be casual, where it's a week or whatever, you get the verbal every time. Their event's over in a week.
Yeah, well, we also know who the repeat offenders are, and usually, if you usually give it truly is a case by case, but a banner, you'll go in and you say, this is illegal, and take it down. And the next day you go back in and they haven't taken it down, and then you give them, it takes 15 minutes to take down a banner or less.
Yeah, less.
So, and especially if they're a repeat offender, we can be very quick and very onerous. So it really matters, but we do have a process in place.
Good.
And the courts do ask for that too, because
In order for them to enforce it.
whoever the offender is going to be in court, he's going to say to the judge, well, I never had enough time to take this down, and so you have to be careful because
Yeah,
you don't
you
wanna
know,
give
by the
them
way, you didn't do it for Jim down the street or Bob down the other way.
But we do have a process and we do follow it.
Good, thank you.
But it is case by case. A banner is less onerous than a fence, so time-wise,
Yeah.
it varies.
Since we're changing, or gonna be changing all of these new sign ordinances, whose onus is it upon the individual retailer to now go back and read all of the new sign ordinances? How can we better service our city by once these ordinances, because this is serious, and I'm telling you out there's probably a violator in every retailer we have. And I think we need to do something to make sure that they have a new copy of this, is maybe when they come in for their business license, so they're aware now of what they can and cannot do.
Well, I think there are a couple of things that we're going to do right away. Number one is that we're going to have an orientation meeting for the code enforcement people. We have two who do code enforcement. Our arborist does it part-time, and then we have a full-time code enforcement person. So we've scheduled for the end of this week an orientation on the new sign orders, so they know what to enforce. And secondly, what we can do is we can pass out to all the businesses, depending on which overlay district they're in or not, what the new rules are.
That'd be one,
So,
I think,
so that because we've done that in the past, and so
Good.
we can do that. And then
that'd be great.
clearly, when they come in for, when a new business comes in for a business license, and they come in for a sign permit,
Right.
I assume that we do
Well, that's all
review it now.
reviewed. I mean, it's by, a lot of times people will call and say, what is your, a lot of times the sign companies are from out of town to begin with, so they're not familiar with our code, so they'll say, excuse me, what does your code require, blah, blah, blah. So, obviously at that point in time, we'll tell them what it is. I mean, to be honest, the actual wall signs and like permanent wall signs and monument signs, those really haven't changed a lot. It's more
No.
of the window signs, and I think maybe we could do a better education with the management companies. Like if you think about Symboler has like a gazillion people in there, I've always thought, well, if they could inform their leasees, hey, when I sign this
Sure.
lease, by the way, why don't you go to Milton, and either we could provide them a cheat
Just put it
sheet.
in a
of basic
PDF, and they
things.
can just refer to the PDF.
Right,
and you're
exactly.
done.
I think that would do a lot of educating, especially in the larger developments, so.
I don't know that I mean, I don't want to disagree. I personally think we can do a lot more than we do, but I also don't think that we ought to feel responsible for spoon feeding everybody. I mean, I think that once the ordinance is available, to have a public meeting, maybe two, and send out a notice and allow people to come and do a presentation on the sign ordinance and let them see firsthand. And then, like Paul said, it's out there on the website, anybody can get it. I think we're going overboard if we start trying to deliver signed ordinances to all the businesses in Milton.
Well, I think your idea, I mean, I agree with your idea
Okay.
of a meeting, but just to put in all these new ordinances, and then the next thing we know, enforcement's out saying,
Oh, no,
hey, you
I
did
agree with you
this and you
100%.
did this.
I agree with you
mean,
100%.
we're doing nothing for our city.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of a handout that says you can't have more than 20% window signage, and you can't have sandwich signs unless, you know, unless you're in Crabapple. So, I mean, a one-pager, because that's most of what is going to be incurred. The big wall signs, the sign companies come in and got that permit, and we pretty well have an idea. But, you know, we've added a lot of blade signs, and this sign and that sign, and if you're in the corner, or if you're in the rear facing. So, you know, we can do just a real easy one-pager, you know, to keep
Okay.
people on the track. So
That's fine.
I don't have a problem doing that. That gets the word out and really direct, and go from there.
I think a meeting trying to explain that would last about 2 days.
Well,
All the questions and what about this, what about that?
but I think that's, I mean, the reality is that the one pager is going to just spark questions anyway. So you're going to have some mechanism for answering them, I think.
Yeah, somehow it's got to get out, because there are a lot of things, if you ask people, I mean, I bet you if you went around the city of Milton and asked everybody, are you aware there's a tree ordinance in the city of Milton? And I'll bet you 70% or more will say, oh, no, I wasn't aware of it. The reason I know, I'm on the ARC on our development.
Right.
So, I mean, we do have to do a better job of bringing people abreast of what is required.
So where do you want to go with this? I mean, I think there's a lot of work that we still need to do with this. I think, you know, looking for what's missing, what's not.
Okay.
I, with Paul, I think would like to make sure let's get a look at what the actual process is, the codified process, and see if there's any recommendations there. I'd really like to get some feedback from Ken to make sure that we obviously don't want to do anything that's in violation of the law, but we want to know how far we can go without violating the law, particularly with respect to the recurrence. And I agree with Chris. I mean, I think if the code enforcement officer has to go out there every day until the problem goes away, so be it. If it gives us the right for each one of those to be cited and each one of those to have a separate fine associated with it, I assume that it's kind of, I shouldn't say, it's implicit in what's here that once you get past the third offense, if you keep violating it, the third offense penalty is going to repeat itself,
Right.
right? I mean, I'm assuming that that's the way we should interpret this.
I just know from like being on the homeowner board that things that are temporary, like a window sign, you need to document that every day. Like if we had a trailer parked, we had to take a picture every day, document it, because they could say, well, I moved it for 3 days. And so that's why something that's temporary has to be documented daily. But it's like, if it's a fence, I think one citation or something permanent should be able to carry forward. But something that's movable or temporary would have to be done daily. But permanent, I think, can be done once. We should be able to, there's one citation.
To Chris's point, a city the size that we are, with a full-time code enforcement officer and our city arborist also playing a role in that, that's ample to really cover our city.
It's more of a legal reason.
Especially-
When I talked to the attorney about it, that we had to document it daily,
Yeah.
or else we couldn't find them.
Especially once we get some of this new knowledge, this new information out there, you would hope that the frequency of offenses would decrease.
And I think they would, once they have this
That's
information.
my point from the beginning, is let's
Absolutely.
get to the point where there's an understanding, there's a
Right.
knowledge level out there.
I agree.
You theoretically get to the point where you've got a part-time, code enforcement
And
officer.
don't forget, the other consideration that you need to be aware of is that it's complaint generated. We don't, you
Right.
know, it's based on
Good
people
point.
calling in, like, your complaint.
Mhm.
It's not that we go out there and look for, which is another different philosophy, you know, in some cities, that's what they do. They go out and they look for code violations. The policy in this city is that it be complaint generated, that we, you know, unless it's those signs that are all over the right of way that, you know, need not be there, you know, the stick-ems, I call them, you know, so we take those away, obviously.
But you know, I think to Gabriel's point, I mean, I think that's another one of those things that the community at large doesn't understand, is that it is complaint generated, so people will look at it and complain about it, but they don't actually complain because they don't know how to
That's
do
exactly
that.
Right, that's right. You have to call us. or email
So,
us.
what's it look like right now as far as the April meeting, agenda-wise? I mean, the March meeting, yeah, I guess it would be March, sorry about that.
Let's see, we have one rezoning and the text amendment where we're gonna revisit the HPC to do the corrections to make it consistent with the state.
Okay, so
So
we
those
ought
are the
we
two
ought
items.
we ought to be able to take this up again then in March.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that, or do we need to have a separate work session to deal with this? We want to just put it on the agenda for March?
It's fine.
Okay,
So we'll try to get back with you about an opinion
from Ken?
That's the key.
As far as doing the recurring fine, the everyday citation.
Yeah, if we could have that
Maybe a
Send that out ahead of
before
Yeah.
time, that'd be great.
And
I'm sorry.
If we could have that from Ken before, that would certainly help us be better prepared for the meeting.
And Robin, if you could send out the enforcement process section of the ordinance,
Okay.
that would be helpful too.
Just, we talked about the business side of it, but what about the residential side to educate the homeowners associations, things like that on cutting a tree down, once it's down, it's down, and, you know, the hot tubs, there's a lot of things here.
That's why I say, I mean, I think we've
residential.
got to have some public meetings to get, you know, and maybe, you guys, that's a good question. Do you guys have an active list of the homeowners associations and the contacts for them? So we could do it through the HOAs and invite the representatives from the HOAs to come.
Yeah, what we've done is we've put it in our ARC request form, the city ordinance on the tree removal. We've incorporated that as part of the approval process. It doesn't mean it works, but we've done it.
Hey, every little bit helps.
I never go to my ARC.
Uh,
But you don't do anything wrong.
Of course, of course. If I can't reach around it, I'm not calling the arborist.
Okay, you want to talk about other projects?
Yes, I'll go ahead and.
And then the sign ordinance?
I guess it's good it wasn't there.
Huh?
I guess it's good it wasn't there.
No,
While she's passing out the sign ordinance, George, do you want me to talk a little about all the meetings that are gonna be hitting?
yes, please do, so people don't lose track.
Yeah, because, okay, let me stand up, I like to see this. All right, we've got two major initiatives going. One is the LCI planning study for the Deerfield Route 9 area, and then the other is the Crabapple zoning overlay. One of those two that we're doing. In terms of the Deerfield Route 9, the stakeholder committee has been meeting. There's a meeting tomorrow morning to review the final draft. And then that final draft is gonna go to a joint meeting, work session of the city council and the planning commission to hear that on March 12th. So you'll be hearing that, and that's the final plan that'll start going through the review process. And once it goes, and because the consultant will be there, so he'll do one presentation, and then after that presentation, then it'll hit your meeting in March for your review, and then it goes on to the city council for their final review and approval. That's the review process for that. The other initiative, which is the Crabapple overlay zone, as well as the transfer of development rights, which is going to be incorporated as part of, there'll be one ordinance for Crabapple, okay? We're having a stakeholder committee meeting tomorrow night. George is going to be very busy. He represents you on both of those committees. And we've got a first draft out of the form-based code for Crabapple. So we're going to be reviewing that. And we're also going to be reviewing the concepts for the transfer of development rights, which will become a chapter in that code.
That draft isn't out, by the way. It'll be out tomorrow, because we haven't, nobody has seen it.
It's
Yeah.
being
Written by
released at the
consultant.
meeting.
Yeah.
Because Caleb, who's our consultant, wants to
Explain.
go over it with you, explain it, because it needs explanation. So that's gonna be released tomorrow night, the first draft. And you're all welcome to come, if you'd like to see it. But
Travel,
at the
we've
joint
been there.
meeting of
I'll send it to you.
of March 12th, when you're gonna be hearing about the LCI planning study, as part of that meeting, since we've got you all in the room, we're going to give you all an overview of this initial form-based code draft, as well as give you a one-on-one presentation about transfer of development rights, what they mean, and how it's gonna work into this form-based code. So that'll all be happening on March 12th. So you'll be able to start the discussion and start the thinking about it. Then after that, we'll have a public meeting of the next night, as a matter of fact, of the Crabapple overlay plan. And then it will hit you in April. It's your April meeting. And I've given you one meeting and possibly two. I think you'll probably want two meetings. The consultants will be at the first meeting. And at least, the one from California will only be at the first meeting. For the second meeting, you'll be on your own about transfer of development rights, but Caleb will come along, I'm sure, he's a form-based code guy. So you'll have April and maybe May. And then after that, I assume, hopefully, that it will leave you, and the council has asked that they get this by June, so it all works. So now that I've totally confused you, do you have any questions? Okay, so everything's on track. And you're welcome to jump in at any point. They're all public meetings. But we've formalized some presentations for you so that you're kept in the loop. Okay.
Just for the benefit of you guys, and this is not intended to be critical, it's just an observation. You know, if I look at those two initiatives, I mean, I think that the work that's being done in Crabapple, and I'm saying this in advance of tomorrow, but based on what I expect we're going to see tomorrow, the Crabapple work has some real substance to it. I mean, the form-based code is ultimately is going to be very, very helpful for us, and it's going to be something we need to spend a lot of quality time on to make sure we get it right. Contrary to that, the LCI process, to me, which I understand is a process used elsewhere, is another kind of a black box thing, to be quite honest. I mean, there's been very little substance presented. We're going to a meeting tomorrow to talk about the final plan. We haven't even seen a preliminary plan yet. The consultant's been pulling all this stuff together in their shop, and it reminds me a little bit of where we started out with the comp plan, right? Where it's kind of, the curtain's going to be opened and they're going to reveal what the final plan is based on a series of meetings where they've collected all this input, but there's been no iterative process to define whether what they've seen is going to work or not, or whether it's what everybody thinks it should be. So, yeah, it's a little bit, just two different approaches. And so when the final plan comes out of the LCI study, there's a very relatively short timeline for being able to respond to that and address that. The public hearing, I think, on that is in April as well, is it not?
I thought there was a public meeting on May 7th.
There is, that's the one I'm
Public
gonna
hearing.
attend.
Yeah, I'm sorry, March 7th.
March 7th, not May
March
7th.
Yeah, March.
Is the
Yeah,
public
but
hearing.
that's not the hearing. That's the final meeting on the plan. The hearing will, I mean, the normal hearing in front of the council will not be until, I think, April.
Well, that's the public hearing on the final plan, and then it goes through the review process, which is, it goes to planning commission, and it'll go to a joint
Right.
work session, and then on to you in April.
Right.
And then on, in March, I guess, the end
Well-
of March, and then in May, April. to the-
Well, I mean, what was published is that there'll be a subsequent public hearing where residents can provide public comment on the draft plan April 9th. That's what was published. The March 7th meeting, the March 12th meeting, and then April 9th is a public hearing where residents can provide public comment.
And that could be, I just,
And then,
you know,
well, according to this, the plan for
Okay.
adoption is April 23rd, so,
yes.
That must have been the first read, because we have a late meeting in April because of spring break.
April
So,
23rd.
Yeah. so-
Yeah, they-
No, the April 9th is probably, that's the city council, that's the
Right.
first read of the city council.
Right, and then April 23rd would be the second one 2 weeks later.
That is correct.
That's, all I'm saying is it's a very tight timeline, so to the
Yeah.
extent you want to comment, we got to really be kind of on our game.
Yeah, but that won't hit, so at the end of April, April 23rd.
Right.
But you'll see it March 12th,
Right,
okay?
Right.
And then you'll see, that's the joint meeting, and you'll see it for your regular meeting, the end of March.
Kathleen, is that one that's being presented at March 12th? Will that be similar to what's at March 7th?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
except that March 7th will only be LCI, and I
Yeah.
think what I heard Kathleen say is that March 12th is also going to be form-based code
Right.
and,
I'm gonna give you, since I've got you all there, I
Sure.
figured that you have a captive audience.
Sure.
So, yeah, the first presentation will be the review of the final plan by the council and you of the LCI.
Okay.
And then mine will be, the council's already heard a little about form-based code, but they haven't heard anything about TDRs, and you all haven't heard about either.
Right.
So, I figured I'm gonna take an hour and give you a
sure,
in-depth presentation, because you'll need it, because if you start to review these things, you sort of have to.
Gotta know.
Understand, that these are sort of cutting-edge planning tools. And so, I think they're great tools, but I have to educate you first before you can, give me your input.
any questions? Okay. I'm not sure what we want to do with the sign ordinance, Robin. The one thing I was going to point out that was the thing you and I talked about after the meeting was the window sign and the 20% versus the 10%. There's an additional requirement that was inserted that it couldn't be any more than 10% in a given, what they call the given elevation. And what I said to Robin is elevation means something different to me. They're looking at the face of the building as being an elevation. So on any face of the building, it can't be more than 10% of the total or 20% of the window. And I'm trying to find the place because I can't remember where it was.
Can't be more than 10% of the
Right.
total, or 20% of the
And,
window.
can't-
and,
it's-
and that goes back to
right.
Councilwoman Karen Thurman, and here's her concern, is that if you had a contemporary commercial building,
Like this.
retail building, but even this is just 50%, but if you had 100% glass, 20%, 100% window on that facade elevation, 20% is a lot, because most buildings have at least it's just 50%, that's window. So if you've got 20% of a 50% glass elevation, that's,
Well, it's 20% of any given window.
which we usually, and we're usually looking at about 50% of the elevation to be window. That, and we took that as an average. If it gets to be more than that, that's when we felt that if it was the whole facade, you should just go to 10%.
Look at
It's on
the
page 25.
Well, it should never be it.
25, 35, yeah, they're
The
different.
top.
It's in each of the overlays.
Okay.
I mean, that
Page
was
25.
It's, I'm sorry?
This is at the top of the page.
It's section L.
Yeah.
This one's for the Route 9.
I think that's.
I just can't visualize that. If I
I didn't understand it that way.
Let's
Counsel.
just do small scale.
Well,
So,
just use this as
well,
an
I
example.
mean, even smaller. Just if this is my window,
Right.
I can only have 20% of this
Right,
Right.
as my usable space.
right.
If this is my glass building, and it's made up of,
100% glass window.
but it's
It's made up
100
of,
windows.
let's say it's made
Okay.
up of 50
10
windows.
50 all glass windows.
Right.
Any one of those windows,
Could have 20%.
Yeah, 20%.
But the additional limitation is that the overall can't exceed 10% of that whole face.
okay, so I'm a building. Okay, that's an interesting application of this, because you now use this building, and I'm a store, and I'm a series of businesses along here. And I've used my 20%, you've used your 20%, Chris has used his 20%, and suddenly we're at 30% of the available glass, and, you know, Fred hasn't got his sign up yet. Fred can't have it.
For one, I mean, I think her intent was
Yeah.
probably one business,
Per business?
Was individual.
right?
Yeah. And I will
Didn't
tell
she-
you that
didn't-
this building here is only 50%. If you go out and look, I went out and looked, and I was surprised that this is not 100%
Right.
glass. This is just 50% of the facade out here.
The one, I think,
So finish that thought, I'm sorry.
no, go.
So, it's still, if it's still by window, whether there's 50% of the facade
But
is,
it's coverage, it's proportional
Yeah,
coverage.
this, to Kathleen's
Is that what that
point,
says?
to Kathleen's point, you could put 20% in every one of those windows and you're not gonna hit the 10%.
Right.
Because you've got 50% of the elevation that's not glass.
Right.
Right.
oh, total wall area, okay.
And
Maybe
that's-
I'm catching on that way.
At the beginning, as I remember, Karen was talking about Kohl's, of seeing all of the windows, 20% of every window at Kohl's
Well,
filled
that would be.
with
that would be
signs.
10%.
But then, pardon?
I said that would be 10%. If you did 20,
No,
if
because, no, because
50%,
if you,
you did 20% of 50, that's 10% of 100. So
Right.
that's,
That's right,
So
that's how
you're
we got
okay.
it.
So you're right
That's
there.
exactly
Right.
how we got it.
but because Cole's above the entry doors is
Exactly
is
as well.
brick,
Right.
Yeah.
or whatever it is, but it's not glass, they can
Exactly.
do 20% in every window.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not often that this would be used, I mean.
Yeah,
reality.
most retail buildings aren't all glass, you know, it's mostly office buildings.
That's why I use
are,
Kohl's as
especially,
probably
you
the
know,
furthest, largest example that you
Yeah.
have.
It's like even Walmart's all brick.
But she brought it up and we felt we needed to address it, so we used it proportionally, you know, 20% or 50%, or 10% of 100%.
This language that's in here is
Not
not
the same.
what you showed me the other night, you changed it. You made it clear, because before it
That's
said.
good.
I know, well, no, before it said 10% of the applicable elevation. Now, you added in total wall area of the applicable elevation, because that's the discussion you and I had after the meeting, was that elevation, it's better, Rob, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Angela, give credit to Angela. She
Angela
did
was
it all. She
tweaking
did-
it, she had a few of those tweaks just like that.
Okay.
I didn't catch all of them.
Well, no, I mean,
But I
the
said to her,
discussion.
clean it up, and if it works, you know, you should.
The discussion that you and I had was without the area in there, if you're just talking about elevation,
So she-
then,
yeah.
yeah. The other thing to note here is that the, what do we call them? What's the window above the door?
Celestial?
yeah.
Is now, you can put signs in that.
Huh?
Really?
No.
Yes, you can.
It says
Says
no
no
window
window
signs are
signs
allowed
are
in
allowed.
celestial.
I'm sorry, not the clerestory, I'm sorry, not the clerestory, the side windows.
Oh, sidelights.
The side lights, we said no signs, now you can put them in the side lights, because that was eliminated from here.
A side light on a,
Yes,
Yep.
spandrel glass, right. Is that what the side lights are?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Spandrel glass, we said no signs before, but spandrel glass is now okay. So,
okay.
anyway.
But again, most of that would be used for, I mean, I don't see that as a big problem.
Hours or something.
Well, hours, we take Visa, MasterCard, you know, I don't, they'd probably have a hard time in that side window to reach 20%.
Yeah.
I didn't get,
Anyway, I'll be honest with you, I was here that night and I read through all the changes. To me, the 10% thing was the only really material
Right.
change from what we had talked about.
Well, also the other thing that they added was the agricultural, related businesses, allowing them to have signs. I don't think you were here,
No.
Right, well,
so
where is that? Because that
that
was,
would be under AG one.
because they were so, I'm sorry, but
It's on page
I don't think
13.
anyone was clear when they voted on that as to what that meant.
Where did that come
It
from?
is,
It was brought in new.
it's under the, okay, it'd be page 13, or actually after.
And we modeled after an old Fulton County zoning ordinance that Robin found in her file.
Well,
But
I mean,
Kathleen, that was-
The idea came from there, but the
Which is what they-
attorney,
Then
he changed it to make it consistent with the no content. So,
Is this the seasonal expressions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where in
B3.
here?
Of
on-
three.
Yeah. On
Other
page
signage?
13, right above the flags. So that's what they wanted, and basically Ken drafted it, and then that's what it came out to be.
So is that a Gordon Hunter sign?
Yes.
Is this the
Yes.
Gordon
I
Hunter
don't know where it
clause?
came
Yes.
from. I mean, I
Sure
walked
we
in
do.
the room
Yeah.
and everybody's
No.
asking
Who are we
about
kidding?
this
Yeah,
ordinance.
that was
I'm
ex-
like,
yes.
Who are we
okay.
kidding?
It wasn't even kidding because it was, he exactly said the Christmas tree sign.
Yeah, this is the Gordon clause. And that's, it's,
Gordon and-
But
I
where
mean, it's
did-
not inappropriate in our community. He's a fixture in the community. The business has been around forever. If our ordinance was too tight it didn't permit that, I'm glad we gave it some consideration. But, if it's something other than that, then,
Well, I think that was the intent, to,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's the tree farm, or whether it's a pumpkin patch, or whether it's a.
Or the
whatever.
farmer's market, someone used
Right,
that example
yes.
too.
But that, how was that introduced? I don't, was it, wasn't that a
One
workshop?
of the council members were discussing it when we walked in the room.
Oh, okay, because
So,
It didn't come from us.
I was
it didn't
here
come
and
from-
it just popped up.
yeah, but before the meeting,
16 square
they were all talking about it.
But they had a problem.
where'd they get, 16 square feet? That's one of
Well,
the
because-
biggest signs we
yeah.
allow.
That
But go
came from
back
Or
over
before.
here, that's where,
I
that's
think
part
that
of where it
size
came
came
from.
from the Fulton County version.
That
4
was the
foot
same
by 4
16
foot.
square feet.
That's about what that Christmas tree is that he uses as a sign.
Now, you know, having said that, and when I read this, particularly the way Ken's written it, you know, it involves the expression of any idea that could be characterized as free speech and which is not necessarily related to a particular use of the land.
It
So,
could be anything.
it can be
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
It
what
doesn't
Fulton
have to
doesn't
be,
like.
Nope.
I mean, it can be a political statement.
Yep.
It can be anything you want it to be, and you can put up a 16, as long as you got the property owner's permission and you don't keep it up for more than 30 days.
Well, you got a permit too.
Right.
So, I mean, you got
And we can't say what you put on.
But you
Yeah.
can't, the permit
Exactly.
can't govern what's on as long as it's not offensive.
Maximum of 30 days in what period of time?
For the season.
No, it doesn't say
No,
that.
it doesn't say
Well,
that.
that's what,
I mean, they could choose it, and it would just be a duration of 30 days.
my notes according to
Is it
that,
one
they
time a
said
year?
I
when,
would say from when the permit was issued.
during the season.
No, this doesn't say that.
No, but that's because he went back and he drafted it to be content neutral and to do it the way it needed to be done. So that's why
Did-
there's a difference, because.
But if you know, if Christmas now starts in July, as it does for many retailers,
You're right.
Right. We couldn't put Christmas season or Halloween season, it just says it says 30 days.
This
is
actually
the
will
season.
restrict Gordon, because he puts his signs up much more than 30 days out of
that's
Christmas.
where I'm going. That's where I'm going with
It's,
it.
Yeah.
it's just a 30-day season, however you define that season. Christmas in July.
One time per year.
Right,
Right.
well,
One time per
So,
permit.
well, again, so if my season is Christmas, and I decide I'm going to put my sign up in October,
Yeah, Halloween.
I only get 30 days
Right.
from that. So I
Right.
can't
Well,
call it
this is-
another Christmas season in November because
Oh,
I'd argue it's
Hanukkah
one
the
of
second
these.
time.
because you can't do content.
Well, I'd argue it's one of these. It's not other signage. It's a freestanding sign per business. I mean, it's a Christmas tree business.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, he
this,
operates it year round. I mean, he may not sell them year round, but he's got to grow them. So I mean, I wouldn't even come in if I'm him. I wouldn't come in and say I'm opening. I need a sign under B3. There's plenty of other ordinances, there's
Well,
plenty of other items in here, I just say I'm getting a sign
Two
for.
by two.
Again, I didn't think about it.
Yeah, I mean, he can use a banner up to a
Yeah,
certain amount of time to
exactly.
get
There's
permission.
plenty of other
He can
sign
use
options in
3
here.
2x2s to get permission from other property owners, you know, so it's just another avenue to do it. I mean,
Yep.
It's not that there wasn't a way to do it before, it probably wasn't the size he wanted, but.
Stay on 13 for a minute too, because the other one that was changed is the one around flags at the bottom of that.
Right.
Each development can have 3 flagpoles. Each single-family detached can have 1 flagpole and 1 flag,
Correct.
and you can't put 2 flags on a pole.
Yeah.
Residential or development?
Either one.
Yes, well, I think a development can have up to 3 flagpoles, but single family.
Correct.
One.
Okay.
So I can't fly a state flag in it?
No,
No.
and you know
Yeah.
why? Because it goes to content again. And etiquette says that the American flag first up the top, and then you put the state second, but we can't
Right.
legislate that. So we took the coward's way out. We said, you know what, we're not even gonna go into 2 flags per pole, we'll just allow 3 poles.
For the commercial.
Right, but as a homeowner, I can't have 3 poles.
That
What
is
if I
correct.
want to fly a national flag and a state flag?
Well,
can't.
I'll tell
I
you.
can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
You've restricted
No,
my
no.
right to free speech.
Not on the pole.
No, you can just alternate them.
Not on the,
I don't
but
think
not
if
on
you-
the
if you
pole.
fly,
But you can have another flag attached to your house
We're not gonna be going
that you can
around
fly
to
the state flag.
Sure.
That's exempt.
Oh, man.
How many
Correct.
people have flagpoles at their houses?
Yeah, that's what
A
I
lot.
was gonna ask.
Yeah, there's a lot of flagpoles.
Not my
Market
neighborhood,
lady.
but.
I know, I was gonna say.
But the one that was okayed was the fact you can have one hanging from a pole attached to your home, and there's nothing written about it. They said, that's okay, we aren't going there,
Right,
right?
that's
Right.
right,
So,
that's right.
to your point, those, in my estimation, could be worse because there's very few people, or I don't know what the percent, that has a individual flagpole. But they said, okay, so I left my
Yeah.
Purdue flag flying. So,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think those were like the.
You can't fly a Purdue
biggest
flag
changes that
and
came
a
from that.
Oh, and the special
National
event.
flag on
Oh,
the
yes.
same flagpole.
That's
Well,
the-
that's right, grand opening,
Flag on the
grand
Grand
opening,
opening.
yeah.
national flag on the pole.
remember how much we worked on that.
You go to
That's saying,
page
I know.
16 on the bottom,
No,
if you wanna see that.
Guys,
Sorry.
Grand
page
opening
16.
events.
We
We have the
created a
grand opening category.
event for 48 hours.
Grand opening event
You're allowed to
signage.
go, you know, you're allowed to do a
Meanwhile,
lot.
I thought that was good, personally.
It's more the going out of business side.
I don't like
grand
the,
opening
I don't
signs.
like the,
Buy business fast.
Yeah.
what you
What's
call
that?
it.
Going out of
Don't
business
say-
signs are there for,
You
you know,
mean-
years.
Searchlights.
Right there.
How the hell we got on searchlights is beyond. What are we?
Why don't you
That's
read,
the
if
council.
you'd like to, would you like Robin to read it out, or you can read it, but it does allow a lot of things to happen in the 48-hour grand opening.
Right.
Yeah, we can be obscene for 48 hours. We can not be a quaint little community. We can be downtown Atlanta. 48 hours, all over the city.
Well, it is only 48 hours.
Just taking notes.
That doesn't make it better for me. I mean, there was a reason it's very easy to become everywhere USA. And that's clearly, in my mind, one step toward that, where we were not everywhere USA prior to adding searchlights. That's too bad. Some of the other stuff is good. That one's too bad.
So any other questions about the sign ordinance?
Where do we cover flags beside what we just looked at?
It should be in almost every.
Oh, no, it's in every overlay.
Well, no, it's in the general,
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. It's in the general, but it's in there by zoning district, right?
Yeah, each one.
And they have
Grand
the light
opening
on.
again.
So where does the flag that Fred's talking about get covered?
In your
that's what
HOA.
we're saying.
No, it's not covered.
It's not.
So
Yeah.
there's no restrictions on that?
No, that's correct.
In your HOA.
That's why I say,
cover
it
that.
was what we worked on to try to keep that away, out of not doing.
Yeah. These flags also only, your Purdue flag wouldn't count even if it was on a pole.
Correct.
Because this is limited to, well, no, I guess it
No,
would.
it's residential.
No,
If I-
it's not that.
It
The
could be any
flags,
content, we can't just say an American.
But we've defined flags to be government or legal entity or organization, so a decorative
legally
flag.
organized organization.
Yeah, so Purdue would qualify, at
Yeah,
least,
as a
at
legally
least
organized
in most states.
organization.
Yeah.
But, but if you wanted to put up a flag of the same size that had cardinals on it, this doesn't apply.
Correct.
You can put as many of those on a flagpole as you want.
Oh, it does say that. It says, flag means any fabric or bunting containing colors, patterns, or symbols used as a symbol of a government or other legal entity or legally organized organization. Although, to be honest, I don't think that that's really the way it should read.
Yeah.
It's content, so that may be something that we may need to look at.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you know,
What I was saying.
because when I was doing the research on the flag and seeing what other jurisdictions do, you know, the truly content neutral is not to even say that it's a government
Right.
instituted flag.
Well, that's my point. I mean, a lot of homes put those decorative.
Right.
Like welcome or something.
Right,
you know,
right,
Flowers.
right.
Seasonal flags that
Yeah.
people get.
Right.
Yeah.
Flower pots.
Yeah.
Big daisy.
Okay, well, this
Those
is.
are exempt, nothing says welcome.
This has been passed. The other thing that you should note, since the last time we looked at this, is that all the enforcement and penalty stuff has been moved to the back. So it shows up as kind of highlighted in here in gray, but all this violation penalties, and there's some new language in there, but that's where it is. And it's passed, so it's a moot point.
But can
So
we
sometimes
discuss,
choose to
can
review.
we discuss what hasn't passed but is in
Yes.
deferral?
Yeah.
Deferral?
Yes, I can, do you want me to review what?
I
the
would like for you to
council-
do that, please.
So,
We're talking about barns.
Barnes.
Yes. Yeah.
Everyone,
I'm
same.
sorry.
Barns
We're
and,
like
Barns and,
silently talking to
Well,
each
So
other.
adopted last week? Yes.
Barns and riding areas and
This
covered
was
riding.
adopted
Yes.
last Wednesday.
Okay, that's,
you did a magnificent job of trying to explain what we worked on for hours about covered, non-covered, with bleachers, without
Yeah.
bleachers, lights, without lights.
And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of, repeat that, it's in the same form, but I'm gonna print it out for you, but I'll just explain to you what.
and I would read the planning, what the planning commission's recommendation was about the council members.
Yes. So the first category would be horses, this is the planning commission recommendation for the first item, is horses only and barns in the front for residential. You all said yes, allowed, that's fine. The city council said any acreage and no use permit, but they also wanted to have any type of animals.
Yes.
So, or what, as we call
Livestock, which includes anything that can be used for food, I believe
Yeah,
is
it's-
defined.
So you could have a hog pen?
Yes, you can.
Actually, it's.
Now, I have
Can-
to say with hogs, you have to be a certain amount of feet away. There's another part of the ordinance
Right,
that
right.
dictates that. But it says livestock means horses, mules, cows, sheep, goats, hogs, and all other animals used or suitable for either food or labor.
But it also
So along.
left out chickens.
Well, it's for food.
Again, let me
What
point
I
out,
read.
let me point out what I tried to point out at the meeting. The ordinance already allows for chickens, it already allows for hogs, it already allows for all that livestock, and everybody spent a lot of time talking about the fact that they wanted to add that. We talked about horses only because horses was a separate category. The ordinance already says that agricultural, general, and specialized farming, including livestock raising and poultry raising.
They didn't talk about the barns, though.
Pardon me?
But it doesn't, but later on, it
No, but it's
talks
livestock.
about the barns,
They're correct.
housing.
It doesn't, it does. It says, that however, buildings used for housing animals must be at least 100 feet from all property lines. That's all it says.
Okay, well, that's.
For livestock.
Okay, well.
Mm-hmm.
But you all had said horses.
No, we
different.
didn't. We didn't touch that part of the ordinance because that wasn't what we talked about. We added horses as a separate thing. We didn't change the livestock piece at all. That's what we were trying to, the
We
point we
never
were trying to
brought it.
make.
Right.
Right.
Oh, so you ended up at the same place then?
Well,
We got
not
double.
really. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, overkill.
Yeah,
Okay.
double.
So under that same subcategory, there would be under horses only barns in front for non-residential, for minimum 10 acres, which is, you recommended to be allowed. And the city council said that you need a use permit needed for less than 5 acres for non-residential, for horses in the front, in the barns, yeah.
So what happens to
No.
the person between 5 and 10?
They
10
don't
goes
need a
away.
use permit.
Oh, 10 goes away.
Yeah, they
There is no
reduced it.
10 anymore.
Right, so it's 5 or less for that category.
Now, what did you say they had to have from 0 to 5? A non-residential?
For non-residential, a use permit needed for.
Special use permit.
That we will be putting together, so that's a
Right?
different section.
Special
Yes,
use permit.
Yes,
For 5 or less.
right.
Now,
And nothing for above.
one thing that, again, wasn't clearly articulated, I think Kathleen did a great job, but, nobody really thought through a lot of this stuff as they usually do. If you're talking about a 1 acre lot with the setbacks that are in here, you physically cannot put anything on the lot.
Right.
It's physically impossible to
Oh,
put
and we
anything on the lot.
did, that did come up.
That came up.
That came up.
Yeah, I think you were in the other meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah,
like,
it can-
you needed, you needed, Karen, I think, brought that up. Karen
Yes.
Zimmerman, That it was, 2 acres wouldn't even get you there.
No.
With all the setbacks. And if you had an odd shaped piece of property, you were going, it would have to be a perfectly shaped piece of property, even with 2 acres, it'd be really difficult.
Right.
But we discussed that.
Okay, so the next section would be uncovered riding areas in the front. For you all, you recommended allowing it in a residentially used property. And the city council recommended
Where are we?
basically the
Are we
same
here?
thing,
No.
any acreage, no use permit. So you have uncovered riding area in front allowed in residential, so that's pretty plain and simple.
What I wrote down was also no lights.
Well, that's coming.
Yeah, this is just plain uncovered.
Okay,
This is just
without,
into it.
This is like the
okay,
pasture
so
with the
then you
fence.
add that back. I'm sorry, okay.
And then the next subsection would be
May help,
for
that's what she's reading
non-residential, what you all recommended, which stated the minimum 10 acres would be allowed. You could have a uncovered riding area. The city council recommended a use permit needed for less than 5 acres again, kind of to mimic what was done with the prior one, as far as barns in the front. So then we come to uncovered riding areas in the front with lighting and/or bleachers, so that's the next subsection. And you all recommended for residential that be prohibited. The city council recommended that you could have it with a use permit for 5 or more acres with a use permit. Just repeated myself, but basically you could do that with a use permit if somebody had more than 5 acres.
Question?
No hardship
So
required.
then less than
No, no
5
hardship
acres would
required.
be prohibited.
Or no hardship measurement.
No hardship
I missed-
demonstration.
No hardship.
Right. What did you just say, Robin? I'm sorry.
That basically, so that means that anybody with
No,
less,
repeat what you just said.
oh, I'm sorry. For residential,
Yeah, we got that. Go on to non-residential.
okay. Non-residential for uncovered riding areas with lighting and or bleachers, you all recommended it was the minimum 10 acres prohibited.
Okay.
Okay, so but that
I
was
think
all
that's going to
prohibited for you all. And for the
Trying to accommodate
city
the
council,
investment
they
level.
again recommended a use permit
Done
for non-residential 5 or more
Stop use.
acres with the use permit. And then, so basically saying less than 5 acres, it would be prohibited. That's what I think I was trying to say, that
Right,
anything under
right.
5 acres would be
Correct.
prohibited.
Now, was,
For the city council recommendation.
right. Is there a separate one, does it go on under
Yes.
lighting itself?
Yeah. Here, Fred.
Yeah.
Let
for
Paul
covered
share that
riding
with you.
areas.
Now we're going into
Into
cover.
covered
Okay.
riding areas. So covered riding areas, you all said for a residential use property, it should be prohibited in the front. the city council said use permit 5 or more acres would be needed for a covered riding area for a residential used property. For a non-residentially used property, you all, the planning commission, with minimum 10 acres prohibited it. So you were consistent with the covered riding areas in the front. The city council recommended 5 or more acres with a use permit. Again, it mirrors the residential with the non-residential, with the covered riding areas in the front. Covered riding areas in the front with lighting and or bleachers, you all recommended in residential to prohibit altogether. The city council recommended a use permit 10 acres or more. So they felt that anything under 10 acres wouldn't be appropriate with that type of use. And then lastly, a non-residential minimum 10 acres, you all prohibited for the covered riding areas with lighting and or bleachers, and the city council again recommended a use permit with 10 acres or more. So basically what's gonna happen is we're gonna try to come up with the verbiage of the actual section of the ordinance, and it'll be reviewed by the city attorney, and then that's what we'll present to them on the 19th.
Question. There was a large discussion on lighting. Define a lighting.
Right.
From one light bulb to, an arena full of bright spotlights.
And what, this
Where
one,
did that go?
That will come under a criteria for the special use permit.
Right,
Okay.
There will be a lumens or whatever, what is the
Yeah.
other
yeah,
one?
foot candles.
Okay,
Candle,
so
yeah.
that's where it'll come up.
That's where it'll come up.
Special
Yeah,
permit.
we'll
Plus,
have
plus it still has to meet the lighting ordinance.
Right,
Yeah,
so
city
it's
right.
stopped.
Yeah.
But-
And I
but-
think they kind of
What-
oversaw that.
Well, what they were trying to do was not have somebody that had a light bulb to get out of their
Right.
little arena being prohibited.
Right.
Right, so that's what we'll catch that.
Okay.
And you'll see the conditions for the use permit.
Well, we have to do that separately, because it's in a different section, so.
Yes,
I'm gonna have to
but
have-
we'll
But
have-
yes, you're right, you all will review that.
Yeah.
new use permit.
I think one of the things that got lost in that discussion that was, I think, something we talked about was we tried to differentiate between a riding arena and a riding area. And everything got mushed together to be area. I mean, we talked about a riding area being like a riding ring, which we didn't object to. We objected to the structure of the riding arena. And when this got presented, that distinction kind of got lost. Everything became a riding area. One question, and this is, the non-residential versus residential. So there's no house on a piece of property, and let's say they get a use permit to put in that riding arena area, whatever, covered, lighted, bleachers, the whole bit. As soon as they start charging fees for the use of that, they become a commercial
business.
property, do they not?
Yeah. How could
Which
they
would
not?
require a rezoning in order to be able to do that?
Well, that's part of what we have to work on more, is defining what a commercial equestrian property would be, or a farm. Because I think there's even people who rent out their stalls and do boarding, and they have a house on with their barn. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily consider that a commercial.
No, I would say the
use.
primary use there is residential, but
Right.
I'm talking about a property that has no residence,
Right.
which was talked about at the meeting, right? No residence, it's non-residential, and they put up that facility as a revenue-producing facility.
And that can exist right now. It does today.
Why doesn't it have to be zoned commercial?
It's the way that the agricultural currently has been enforced and.
No, because that's the objection that I have. When you look at this, the definitions, it's for raising livestock and poultry, horticulture, plant nursery, greenhouse, dairy farming. Nowhere does it say that the riding function as a revenue-producing business is allowed.
Riding, stabling,
Any of that.
Right.
horses for lease.
Well, I guess one would argue that under the definition or the permitted uses under AG1 of agricultural, general and specialized farming, including horticulture, plant nursery, blah, 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 livestock raising and poultry raising provided, however, I think the part of agricultural, general and specialized farming, that's where that would
Okay.
currently fall under.
Okay.
And you're right, you're totally right. I mean,
Well, we
we
could-
don't have a way to really define a truly commercialized equestrian facility, and that's something I think that we're gonna have to work on.
We've
that.
already started talking about it, because
Well, we
this
have-
discussion
A year ago.
precipitated the further discussion, which is exactly where you're going.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it's a valid point, and, you know, I've looked at other jurisdictions that have a lot of equestrian in it, and they do define what is a commercial farm. They don't require a C1 zoning, but they have some other qualifications for that.
Okay.
Yeah, it becomes a very different kind of business when you're suddenly generating trips to and from the property.
Sure.
And there's parking, and then there's,
You got the parking issue, where do you put the trailers, you know, so it becomes a public safety issue, it becomes a noise issue, you know.
and it's not just trailers for, if it's one thing, if it's residential, you may have one trailer or two trailers, because that's what's gonna be managed by that individual owner.
Right.
But if it's a stabling environment where you may suddenly have a demand for 20 trailers,
Or they have.
Or it's a
horse
show
shows.
arena.
They have
Yeah.
shows. You have hundreds of people come.
The parking restrictions and.
well, that's
That's
what we're
something-
talking about, and there's not.
PG1 wouldn't have any parking
That's
requirements.
part of the issue, you know, they park everywhere, and then it's a public safety access issue for fire trucks to get through. I mean, there's a whole host of problems that we have with those.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, while it's not a perfect example because it had a residential house on it, the place at the intersection of Bethany,
Right.
and Webb, right there.
Hopewell.
Yeah, what the old building was there, the riding
That's in
arena.
Forsyth, you're talking about the one, or no?
It was a riding arena and
The one at Bethany
stabling,
and Hopewell?
and they had,
Bethany and, where did you say, Bethany and where?
and Webb.
And Webb.
No, not Webb, but.
McGinnis?
McGinnis.
Yeah, you're talking about the one on the Forsyth side.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Down
That
by
was a
the-
perfect
the
example of
school.
where they were,
Across from the school.
No,
Yeah, further.
it's up by Forsyth County line, up Bethany Bend.
yeah, if you
right.
could just go to Bethany Bend where it runs into McGinnis Ferry, it's,
Yeah, there's no little old school, little red
Oh,
schoolhouse.
the little, yes.
You know where the little red schoolhouse is, right there on the corner?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Apple something around.
Driving
Right
range
Apple,
used to be
yes.
down
yeah,
there.
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, right there.
Okay.
That's where it's at. That, was everything there. They were stabling horses, they were teaching people to ride there, lessons were given, there's a riding ring, they had lights there, they had the whole thing.
Well, we have it too. I mean, actually, Shannondale Farms, I mean, it's fairly well protected, but it's a very large operation.
The one at, on Hopewell,
Oh, Birmingham.
No, Birmingham
Yeah.
Road.
Birmingham Road.
well, and the big,
Oh, the Shannondale's on Birmingham,
Yeah.
and then
well, what's the one at
The
Hopewell?
Fortune Farms
the
or,
Fortitude.
The big one
Fortitude
at
Farms.
Hopewell.
that's
Yeah.
Fortitude.
It's right across
Yellow-
from
Near
Bethany.
Bethany.
Yellow barn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw the lights,
That's
I
another example.
don't know if you guys saw it, I didn't realize it was there. You know that house right across from there that's always for sale right on the corner of Bethany and Hopewell? The-
Yep,
the
right.
left- The left-hand corner?
Mm-hmm.
There's a big riding ring
There
behind
is,
it
yeah.
that's lit.
Oh, really? No, I've never
I didn't know
seen
it was lit
lit.
until I went
No.
by the other night and all the lights were
Oh,
on.
I didn't either.
That's the same thing I encountered on Birmingham Road, right near Canterbury. Remember we had a discussion about that a while ago? It's like, where the heck did that come from?
But those are all
You know,
grandfathered,
gigantic
correct?
Poles with lights.
yeah.
So they were built, yeah, I mean, it's,
And that's where I don't know, for the life of me, how we, or they, the enforcer, can determine
What's
who's
grandfathered,
old and
what's
who's
not.
new.
well, we know for the last
We have
5
the
years
permits.
whether we have building
Yeah.
permits or not.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. I mean,
Yeah.
the one on Hopewell was built prior to us
Boy.
becoming a city. The Shannondale Farms, that was built before us becoming a city. I mean,
By the way, Laura Bentley tried very hard to convince everybody that, you can pick up one of these arenas someplace that's fallen
Yeah,
apart and
move it.
dilapidated and move it and put in front of somebody's house, and
Yeah.
nobody wants that, but that
Right.
didn't deter anything.
so is there anything else y'all want to talk about?
No.
Okay.
Anything else for the good of the cause?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.